What's up guys, it's Ivan, and on this channel I provide tips, tricks, advice, and strategies for your graduate school applications. So if you are new here, consider subscribing. In this video, I am going to share with you some of the questions that I wish I would have asked during the graduate school interview process. Before we get into the video, I wanted to remind you that the interview process is also an opportunity for you to learn more about the faculty, staff, and administrators. You are also interviewing them as well as them interviewing you. When you are thinking about graduate school and choosing the right program, you want to make sure that fit is what you're looking for, not just prestige. So you want to make sure that you ask a bunch of relevant questions to both faculty, staff, students, and administrators. That way you get a sense of what the culture is like at the institution and at the program. During the interview process, I wish I would have asked faculty the following questions. How long does it normally take for students to graduate within the department? This is an important question to ask because of a couple of things. For the PhD, for example, usually students take 5+ years to complete a PhD. Some programs, their time to degree is longer, so I've heard that the humanities, like a history PhD, for example, or a philosophy PhD, could take 6 to 8 years to complete. And so you want to make sure that you know exactly what you are getting yourself into and how long you are expected to potentially take to complete a PhD and all its milestones. For my program, for example, my program on their website, it strictly said 5 years, but I found out later through the graduate school interview process that I can complete my program within 4 years if I wanted to. Obviously, the planning is going to look a little bit different, but most students take about 5 years. And so this is great information that I gained from my interview process because it allowed me to better plan what my future would look like. So I want you to do the same thing. I want you to ask faculty, staff, and students, what is the average time to degree for your PhD program and for students in your program? The next question that I wish I would have asked was, what are your graduates doing now? This is an important question to ask because you want to know what the graduates of that program are doing currently. Have they been accepted into postdoctorates? Have they been accepted into faculty positions? Are they on the tenure track? Are they pursuing industry? You want to know what the outcomes have been for the PhD graduates because it's going to give you a better sense of how you are able to market your skill sets that you gain from that program into the job market. Let's say, for example, the program that you are considering does not have a high yield of students, gaining some type of faculty position after graduation, and that's your goal. You might want to consider which program you are going to get into. So if your goal is to attain a tenure track faculty position, then you want to make sure that you ask the person that's interviewing you, what are the graduates doing now? Do most graduates go the tenured academic route? Do they go into industry? Do they pursue postdocs? Or do they pursue other, nonprofit or governmental career? And so you want to make sure you ask these questions to your advisor and other administrators, even the students. That way you get a sense of what it's like and how competitive you will be once you complete your PhD. Something else that you want to ask is if the advisor can speak about the degree requirements and different milestones. For a PhD program, for example, there are several milestones. One of those milestones is completing coursework. In my program, usually coursework takes 2 years. So you take 2 years of full credits every quarter because we're on the quarter system, and then you complete your coursework. The coursework is meant for you to gain some breadth and information on a certain topic, and then generally, in my case, education. The milestone after that is the qualifying exam, which means that I have to write a literature review and I have to submit it to a committee, a blind committee of 2 people who will either approve it or not approve it. And then if they do approve it, then I advance to candidacy, which means that I will have to propose a research dissertation and submit that to a committee. Obviously, you have to form a committee, then you write your dissertation, collect data, and do all that before you have to present and defend your dissertation. And those are some of the milestones that my PhD program in particular entails. So you want to make sure that you ask your advisor or the person that's interviewing you, What milestones do I have to complete to attain my degree? If you're pursuing a master's program, for example, there's going to be different types of milestones. Mostly for master's programs, all you really have to do is complete coursework. If your master's program is a thesis-based program, then you obviously have to complete a thesis to be able to graduate with your degree. So you want to make sure you ask your advisor, the person interviewing you, you want to make sure you ask them what are those milestones, that way you're able to prepare yourself for what is going to happen once you enroll in that program. Something else that I wish I would have asked my potential advisor was the following question. What are your current research interests and projects? The reason why this is important for me personally is because of funding opportunities. If your potential research advisor is working on a bunch of projects that have been funded through different resources, then that means that you're probably going to be able to get a research job through your advisor. And you want to work closely with your advisor. So this is the best bet in terms of you gaining experience in your field and your specialty, but also building that connection, that network with your advisor. So you want to make sure you ask them, what current research are you working on and what current projects are you on? That way you're able to kind of assess what your life might be as a PhD student, because usually research advisors have you work on their projects so you can gain some research experience. And if the projects are not interesting to you, then you might have a miserable time as a PhD student. If the projects that the person's working on is not what you are interested in, then you might want to consider a different program or maybe even a different faculty member to work under. Another question to ask your potential research advisor is the following. Do you have grant money to support your research? If not, are you pursuing funding and do you think that you're likely to get it? This question is important, again, similar to the previous question for funding purposes. You want to make sure that you are able to get paid and you have a living stipend, maybe even tuition remission. That way you're able to have a free PhD experience. And one of the ways to do that is by obviously acquiring research experience via a graduate student researcher position, which is something that I have currently. Although it's not with my advisor was able to connect me with another resource on campus that was able to hire me and for me to do some research and some assessment work. And so I'm still gaining those research skills and I'm getting paid. I'm working 10 hours, I'm getting tuition remission because of this position. And it was because my advisor connected me with another organization. But if your advisor currently has funding or has applied to funding, then you have a safer bet in terms of securing funding for your program. So you want to make sure you ask your advisor if they have applied for funding, or if they have attained any funding, or if they plan to apply to funding in the future. That way you're able to secure funding for yourself and you're able to have a free PhD experience. Additionally, it's always great to have an advisor who has a track record of getting funding, grant funding. And the reason why is if you're going to become a faculty member in the future, you have to secure funding for your research projects. And if your faculty advisor is able to secure that, while you're a PhD student, they can teach you how to secure funding from really prestigious organizations. That way you're able to learn what a successful grant application looks like. That way you're able to apply when you are either a PhD student, a postdoc, or even a faculty member. So it's always great to see this experience in action. So you want to make sure you ask your faculty advisor, whoever's interviewing you, what grant applications look like and if they have secured any during their tenure at the university and in the program. In relation to the research questions, you also want to ask, what are your research facilities like? So laboratory, specific equipment, etc. For the social sciences and maybe the humanities, lab equipment might not be something that you are going to be using, right? So you want to make sure that you understand, what does a research center look like for the social sciences and the humanities? So for example, in education, we don't have any lab. It's more independent work. So you meet with your research group. In this case, we're meeting through Zoom, and you discuss, the goals of the research, where you're at, the progression of what you're doing. And you do it mostly electronically through like Google Docs or different ways that you can connect a bunch of people on a document. And so that's kind of how we go about meeting with our research groups instead of actually going to a lab like maybe the scientists would and conduct experimental research with different equipment that you use when you're conducting research in the sciences. So you want to make sure you understand what these facilities look like, especially if you are in the sciences and you need specific equipment. You want to make sure that your faculty member or your institution or your program has that equipment that's going to be able to help you reach your goals in terms of your research dissertation or your research projects, and they have the equipment that's going to help you, get to that point that you want to be with research. So ask this question during your graduate school interview process. Another question that you might want to ask is about funding. What percentage of your students have teaching assistantships and research assistantships? This is obviously an important question to ask because you want to go to a PhD program that's fully funded. That's one of my tips that I want to give you. Do not take out loans and do not pay out of pocket for a PhD program. A PhD program could last 5+ years. So if most students don't have that money to be able to afford a PhD, so you want to make sure that you are going to a program that's going to fully fund you. And you want to ask this question right off the bat when you are interviewing and even when you get accepted. So you want to make sure you understand what the funding package looks like, and if that entails you working 20 hours per week, 10 hours per week, or if you don't have to work. In my case, they said straight up from the beginning once I got accepted in my program that I was expected to work at least 20 hours per week in order for me to gain tuition remission as well as a living stipend. And so I do that by conducting research for 10 hours a week, and then I also am a TA for 10 hours. And so they told us in our orientation that we would either get mostly teaching assistantships, but some of us would get research opportunities. It just depended. My program, most of the students in my program are TAs, and they work 20 hours per week. My case is a little bit different because I was able to secure a research position and not just teach for 20 hours per week. But you want to ask this question right off the bat during the interview process because you want to understand what the funding is going to look like if you get accepted. It's better to plan ahead than wait until you get accepted and receive the funding to be able to decide where you want to go or if that's going to be a good fit for you. Like I mentioned before, the interview process, the interview stage is a great opportunity for you to get a sense of how you fit within the program and the institution and the people that you're going to be working with, so faculty, staff, administrators, and students. In relation to funding, you also want to ask, is there a limit to the number of years, semesters, quarters of assistantships a student can receive? This is an important question to ask because, again, you want to make sure you understand the structure of your funding package. For example, when I applied to multiple PhD programs, they offered me different funding packages. So the current program that I am in, they said that I was going to be fully funded for 5 years. And so that told me that I was going to be able to secure an assistantship, whether it was teaching or research, for 5 years. Some programs told me that I was only going to be able to secure funding for 2 years, so half of the program. And so you want to make sure you understand what funding will look like for students that get admitted. And most programs tell you either on their website or they tell you in the interview process. But you have to ask because they're not going to tell you right away. Obviously, when you get accepted and you have orientations, you can also ask these questions, especially if you decide to visit the program once you have been admitted. But it's never too early to ask about funding right away because you want to make sure you plan ahead. So you want to ask what the funding looks like, but also is there a maximum number of quarters, semesters, or years that you can, work as a TA or as a researcher. You want to ask these questions during the interview process. Another question you might want to ask, do you financially support students travel to conferences? This is an important question to ask as well because as a PhD student, you are expected to conduct research and obviously present that research. But honestly, with a graduate student stipend, we don't have a lot of money left over to be able to, travel, which means you would have to buy an airplane ticket, you would have to buy accommodation. You would also have to be able to afford the food that you're going to be buying. So you want to make sure that your program does have funding for its students to travel to conferences. So you want to ask, this question here, do you support students to travel to conferences? Most institutions, most programs do have a small budget, whereas a graduate student, you're able to apply for funding. That way you're able to either partially pay for the experience or fully pay for the experience. I know in my program, they do provide like registration fee, either reimbursements, or they give you some type of discount code or something that you're able to use when you're applying. Usually they don't fully fund travel experiences, so you want to make sure that you're able to secure funding in other ways. One way that I'm planning on securing funding myself is through my advisor. My advisor does secure a lot of grant funding, and she told us during our team meetings that she was able to pay for our registration and maybe even accommodation fees. So you want to make sure that you obviously ask if the department or the program has funding for travel, but if they don't, ask your advisor if they have funding for you to be able to travel to the conferences. Finally, the last question that I wish I would have asked during my interview process for graduate school is the following. This is probably the most important one too. If the stipend is for 9 months, how are your students supported during the summer? If not, what do most students do to cover their living expenses? This is important because most graduate school packages are based on a 9-month salary, which means that during the summer, you either have to secure your own funding or apply for a job to be able to, make ends meet during the summer. My program is structured like this, so we only are able to work as TAs and graduate student researchers during the 9-month academic period, which means that I would have to apply for TA positions as well as research positions, or look outside of my department, or even look outside the institution to be able to secure funding for the summer. Right now, I'm actually struggling with that. I'm kind of planning and trying to see if there's jobs out there where I'm able to apply and find jobs and maybe even secure funding that's relevant to what I want to do as a career. But if not, then I'm going to have to do other things to be able to supplement my stipend that I have for 9 months. So you want to ask this crucial question because you don't want to be in the predicament where you go to a program and they don't provide you 12 months salary and you are stuck in the summer with no income. So you want to ask what that structure looks like, and then you want to plan ahead, obviously, to be able to make sure you apply for positions in the summer that are going to be able to help you gain some income during the summer. All right, guys, so that concludes my video on questions that I wish I would have asked my faculty advisor during the interview process. Let me know if you have any questions about asking questions or even just the interview process as a whole. Ask in the comments down below, or you might want to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do have another video where I interviewed a student who got into 10 graduate school programs, and we discussed in detail what the interview process looked like. And so you might want to check that out. I'm going to put it in the cards up above. That way you're able to see and you get to learn what the interview experience looks like. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video.